Okay, the following is the full story of what happened to me when I was hit from behind by a police car while I was on my bike. On July 26, 1996, I was riding my bicycle in the critical mass, which still happens monthly to this day. Early on in the life of the critical mass, it had only been happening monthly in Toronto for about 3 years at that time, and the police still claimed to be unaware of it. These rides were happening at the time to gently protest the Toronto Police's unwillingness to enforce the many laws which exist to ensure cyclists' safety and to make a statement to motorists that we are here and we're traffic too. The ride had a cheerful and positive energy, and the riders were looking forward to having fun. As I'm sure you know, the critical mass is always a pleasant, peaceful event. In this particular ride, there were approximately 300 cyclists. We'd been riding for maybe 15 or 20 minutes when we came to the intersection of Yonge and Bloor Streets. At that intersection, many of the cyclists decided to cork the intersection by riding around in circles in the middle of the intersection, thereby stopping traffic in all directions. I did not participate in this activity, as my brother is a police officer who, at that time, was with the Town of Collingwood Police, and as such I did not feel it was appropriate for me to participate. Instead, I stopped my bike by the side of the road on the northeast corner of the intersection, in front of the Hudson's Bay Tower, and waited until the corking was over and a new direction for the ride was established. The corking never lasts long and is only done briefly to make a quick point and not interfere with traffic very much. The new direction was southbound down Yonge Street. As I had been waiting at the north side of the intersection, I obviously ended up at the back of the pack of cyclists as we collectively traveled southbound, using up both southbound lanes, ringing our bells in unison. We were not breaking any laws in doing so, as the purpose of the event is to merely point out that we are traffic too. We remained in the southbound lanes and took them up entirely, as there were so many of us, while we continued to travel south. There was suddenly a police car making that quacking sound that a police car can make that's not a siren right behind me. It was moving fairly quickly, and we all had to get out of the way in order to not be hit. No lights were flashing. I tried to get out of the way, but there were so many other cyclists in my way, so I was unable to move over in time when the police car hit me from behind. The sound of all the bicycle bells jingling had been sufficiently loud enough to drown out the sound of the police car. None of us heard it coming until about 4 seconds before the collision. We were scrambling to get out of the way, but the sheer number of us were unable. I was almost knocked from my bike, but I managed to stay up, and the car stopped and I put my feet down. Now with the car beside me, he had hit me He had hit me with the front right corner of the car. Due to the fact that I was actively attempting to get out of the way, I shouted obscenities in the open passenger window of the car, and then I attempted to resume the ride, but I could barely go. The back axle of my bike was broken, and the rear fender was folded up behind me against the tire. It now resembled an accordion. I also got whiplash. The police officer in the car jumped out of the car and ran up to me and tackled me from my bike, pulling me to the ground and ripping my shirt almost in half. Then he slammed me down against the hood of the car, handcuffed me, and forcefully shoved me in the back of the cruiser amid the shocks of horror from the crowd. A new film, ironically Super Cop, was opening that day, and there was a crowd of 200 people lined up on Yonge Street in front of the Uptown Theatre waiting to see it. These people also all witnessed the incident. Combined with the approximately 300 cyclists, there were approximately 500 people present at the time of the incident. Few of the cyclists saw this happen, though, as they were all in front of me and still blissfully jingling their bells, oblivious to the rogue police car. But word quickly spread through the crowd like wildfire. There were, however, a few witnesses, one of whom I'm still in contact with today. I'm also still in contact with several of the people who were in the ride and remember the atmosphere of joy and how it was quickly disrupted. Cyclists and moviegoers alike were horrified by this event, and a small riot broke out. Some people were surfing my mangled bike in the air above their heads while shouting for my release. Others were rocking the police car back and forth, trying to overturn it with me inside. I remember being both pleased by the show of support and afraid that if they did manage to roll the car over with me inside of it, I would not be able to brace myself, as I was handcuffed and not wearing a seatbelt. Hundreds of people were booing and shouting at the police. Officer Benton had single-handedly taken a peaceful event and turned it into a riot. Is that what the Toronto police are trained to do? I thought they were there to keep the peace. Apparently, so he claimed afterwards, he had been angry because he had been stopped in the traffic, 3 or 4 cars back from the intersection caused by the cyclists who were corking the intersection. In other words, he had road rage. Once traffic was moving again, he chose to deal with his anger by using his cruiser as a battering ram against the crowd of cyclists. He's lucky nobody was killed. Ironically, if the police had actually been willing to enforce the laws which are there for cyclist safety, i.e. charging motorists who violate cyclist safety, none of this would have even happened. Critical mass did indeed begin because of a need by cyclists to be seen, heard, and respected. After I was arrested, a second police car showed up from the south and stopped on an angle blocking off the entire street. Hundreds of people were shouting. One man, João Rolo, was in the crowd innocently standing beside his bike, watching the turn of events. He was not involved in the rioting in any way. A police officer from the other car went up to him and him alone and told him to get off the road. He moved over but was unable to go far because there were so many other people around, and the police car angle parked across the roadway, blocking all traffic. He made it to the edge of the road, but the police officer followed him and again told him to get off the road. He did not tell anyone else to get off the road, only João. At this point, João asked, "Why?" The police officer grabbed him and threw him under the back of the car I was in, handcuffed him, and put him into the second police car, which was angle parked across the roadway, blocking the street. The charge against João was blocking traffic. The only one blocking the traffic was the police themselves. Northbound traffic had continued to flow freely until the second police car came along and angle parked across the center of the roadway, thereby blocking all traffic in all directions. Southbound traffic had been flowing too, albeit at a reduced speed of the crowd of cyclists, until Officer Benton created the riot. I was brought to 52 Division, strip searched, and placed in a holding cell where I was kept in the cold without food, water, or even the ability to pee from 7 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. My shirt was also half torn off of me. Why was it so cold in there? How come no one brought me any supper? I can remember needing to pee. I had been left alone in there for a long time. I could hear conversations on the other side of the door clearly. One even commented about my shirt in a mocking way, like I had intended to go out in a shirt which was nearly half torn off. I began to knock on the door. My knocks were ignored. Eventually, I began knocking louder. After a while, someone on the other side of the door said, "He's knocking, should we answer him?" The other person said, "Just ignore him." At this point, I turned around backward and began to boot my heel against the door as hard as I could. After about 1 minute of pounding and probably 20 minutes in total since I first began knocking, they finally yelled through the door, all angry with me for my rudeness. I said, "I have to pee. If you don't open this door and take me to the washroom by the time I get to 10, I'm going to pee under it." Then I began counting. By the time I reached 6, the door was opened by a very angry officer who was intent on intimidating me. He tried to tell me that no one could hear me knocking. I said, "Don't lie to me. I could hear every word you said out there, and if I can hear you, then there's no reason that you can't hear me." He told me to wait a minute and someone would come help me. Interestingly, it was Officer Benton who came. Strangely, he'd been the one playing good cop in all the good cop, bad cop ritual all along. While I was in the holding cell, occasionally a cop would come up to me and be nothing short of mean to me, talking down to me and intimidating me, like he was intentionally trying to make me angry. And then a few minutes later, a good cop, usually Officer Benton himself, would come in and be all nice to me. This happened continually for the first hour or two of my holding, and continued at a diminished rate during the remainder of my time there. Eventually, I got to go home, but I had been treated really badly. Most of the cops were rude, unnecessarily forceful and intimidating to me. The reason that they had left me in the holding cell for so long, I later found out, was because a couple of hundred of the cyclists and moviegoers who had seen this had all followed the police car to 52 Division and were holding an impromptu demonstration outside the station for my release. In the Toronto Police's ultimate arrogance, instead of realizing and accepting that the people were right and letting me go, the police had decided to show a strong force of solidarity and not release me at all until the last of all the people had left. This is probably why they were so hard on me throughout the entire time. They were afraid that if they actually admitted wrongdoing in a situation like that, then people would stop respecting them, when the exact opposite is true. They made many people disrespect all of them forever that evening, including me. It takes a lot of bravery to admit that you're wrong and to make amends. To do so is highly honorable. I guess it can be concluded that few of the Toronto police have that kind of bravery or honor, and then they wonder why they're not respected and why their jobs are so much more difficult than necessary. After I was released, I had to face the serious embarrassment of being on the front page of the Toronto Star the next morning in a story which told the police's side of the story rather than the truth. My grandmother called me at 7:30 in the morning and asked, "Is this you?" Later that day, I got a phone call from someone who had witnessed the entire event saying he wanted to meet with me. As a result of that meeting, the advocacy group ARC, Advocates for Respect for Cyclists, was formed. They've been a powerful force in the city, providing legal guidance and financial assistance to cyclists who, like me, are wrongfully arrested and still exist to this day. Something good came out of it. I later went to the reporter of the Toronto Star to see if he would print a follow-up story, and he told me that it was not in the interest of his readers. The charges against me were failure to stop. For what? And mischief under. The cop claimed that I had approached the police car while kicking it. This was absolutely not true. No kicking it happened at all from anyone. I have the original synopsis of events written by the police the day of the day in question, and it's so full of lies that it doesn't even make sense. They're trying to say that when they first approached us, we had been a violent and angry mob of cyclists. It was critical mass. Critical mass is never violent or angry. It's a fun, happy event to promote bicycle awareness and continues to happen monthly in Toronto and most major cities on every continent in the entire world. It also says that we were continuing to circle Yonge Street while riding southbound, blocking all north and southbound lanes. Say what? How is it that we were circling Yonge Street and riding southbound at the same time? That's not even possible. I think that speaks volumes as being a falsehood. Even if it were possible, it was critical mass. Critical mass is about being traffic, not about being a public nuisance. Even though they do cork intersections at times, that's a relatively minor inconvenience to traffic at best. I also did not condone or participate in the corking. If the entire ride had been about being a nuisance, I would have not taken part in it. Furthermore, how is it even possible to kick a car while riding a bike, especially a car which approaches the cyclist from behind? The entire synopsis is about fabrications like that, which are not even possible. Please check for part 2 of this story.